everyone. Welcome to another hot take. My name is Tara. I'm your host and founder of McEwen Media. I'm really excited about this conversation because the elevator pitch and sharing your story is the most valuable tool any business owner can master. And yet it's one that we always struggle with, right? There's always that fine balance of, well, when do I launch into the sales and how do I keep it from sounding like a commercial? If you can master this skill, you can master your business. And I'm thrilled to talk to Trish Tonaj, who is actually the person who started my own journey in sharing my story. So Trish Tonaj is an artist, author, and the founder host of ShareYourStories.online, a passion project that introduces small business owners and share their great ideas. Her podcast, Business Mentorship, Keeping It Real, provides insight into the person behind the logo, so that everyone can be seen, heard, found, and hired. It's a great place to share your business story, and I can attest to that. Trish recently has been recognized by her peers as 2024's Leader of the Year, Women Changing the World America. So with those credentials, please join me in welcoming Trish Tonaj.
Thank you, Tara. It's so great to be here. I'm really looking forward to meeting the folks in your network.
Oh, amazing. And I'm so glad, I'm so glad to bring them to my network because the people who are here, I think a lot of them only know me as this, constant presence in their feed. But when we first met, that was not the case. I was still struggling with being in front of the camera and sharing my story. So can you actually start with your origin story? How did you start this passion project to share your stories online?
Well, that's a really interesting story because I was taking an executive education program at Harvard Law School, getting a certificate in mediation and dispute resolution. And I had the pleasure of spending some time with 57 other entrepreneurs from around the world. And in our conversations, we started talking about the people who have helped us along the way on our own personal journeys, personal and professional. And I realized that the most profound experiences were with ordinary people, just like you and me, who had stepped up and had helped someone in some way. And I left that experience and decided to write my second book, Breaking Barriers, 10 Entrepreneurial Women Share Their Stories. And within 1 year, found the ladies to share their stories. And we were published and in Chapters Indigo and in Barnes & Noble in the US.
Oh, amazing. And I love how it seems like such a simple gesture. I'm going to give you a platform to share your story. But like, if I can share from my experience, sharing your story, it's easier said than done because especially with the work that I do with clients, we don't always understand the true depth and value of the stories that we carry. Especially, when we first met, I was still grappling and understanding the extent to what I could bring to other people. At that time, I think the only service I was offering was getting people booked on TV, which sounds exciting. But as someone who worked in television for 15 years, I'm like, yeah, writing a pitch is the easiest thing in the world. Sending an email is the easiest thing in the world. I know that I'm capable of more, but I didn't have the understanding, the story, or the words to express what that more was. And I was so nervous about sharing my story because as a producer, you're supposed to be in the background. Right? No one's supposed to know what a producer does. That's the magic of television. You're not supposed to know how the sausage is made. So the act of sharing my story was so unnerving for me just because I wasn't familiar with that. And because I wasn't familiar with it, I didn't know the true value. I didn't know what audience I would find. And I think you made it such an easy process. We're just going to share your story. I want to know how, your origin story. And it was such a simple thing. Like, how did you come up with this idea? That one conversation made it possible for me to then continue sharing my story and exploring my story and just keep uncovering ways that I can help businesses. And now, I get people on TV, but then I also help them show up on social media. I help them be stronger on Zoom. I help them with all different ways of presenting themselves to an audience and grow their business. And it started just with that simple conversation.
Yeah, it's so true. That conversation really opens the doors to so many things because I don't really think we know who do you know? Who do I know? Who can I connect with? Who's listening maybe to the story? And then from there, you just never know what doors and windows will open as a result of that. So, being able to describe what we do and how we can help is actually the most profound statement that you can make, especially in a networking environment. You've got like 30 seconds to make an impression. So what do you want to tell people about you?
You do. And I think that that is where people get wrong with the elevator pitch. So for me, what I've experienced and what I continue to see is that people think that the elevator pitch is their 30-second ad. So then it's almost like, well, I asked you what you do, and you're giving me the pre-roll of a YouTube video. So
Right.
to me, the biggest mistake people make in creating an elevator pitch is they go right to the sales.
Right.
And I think you need to have a different entry point. Like, as you said, you never know who is on the other side of that door. You never know, like the literal elevator pitch was you have 30 seconds to get to the top floor of an elevator.
Right.
So you have 30 seconds with the executive. What do you want them to know about you? They want to know about you. So
That's
make
right.
that 30 seconds about who you are.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, the sales discussion comes long after, telling people what you do. And I think one of the things that we've forgotten is that it has to be a conversation. You have to give people information about your story so that you can continue the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And because if we're all about relationships and selling is all about building relationships, people don't want to be sold in the first 30 seconds. They want to hear about who you are. Who is the person behind the logo? And that's really, I call it sharing the elevator story. I've tweaked the pitch a little bit because I think that's where people get confused. The pitch is relative to sales. The story is relative to who you are and what you do. So I tweaked that a little bit just so that to make it a little bit more user friendly so that people can get off of I need to pitch you for a sales, opportunity. And rather than doing that, saying, okay, this is who I am. This is the problem that I solve, and this is how I can help you.
Yeah. What would you say should be the 3 key elements then that people have in their elevator story?
Well, the first thing is who you are. The second thing is what solution or what are you offering? If I have a problem, what's your solution? How can you help me? And then the third thing is how to continue the conversation. Because if we're not continuing the conversation, then we don't have any connection. And so it's not even about what social media connections do you have. I'm not talking about that kind of connection. I'm talking about how do I get in touch with Tara? How do we sit and have coffee? Maybe we're going to do a Zoom call or use some other social platform to connect. But how do we continue the conversation? So I think those are 3 really key elements in the elevator story.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, putting the emphasis on you. I always think I bring everything back to TV. So I remember Oprah Winfrey in an interview said that passion is the most attractive thing to any audience. So when I talk about, presenting your business and being in front of someone, if you're in front of one person, that's an audience of one. So that one person, if all audiences are attracted to passion, share your passion, share your excitement.
Yeah.
I belong to Women in Film and Television. So as a way to expand my network in the television space. And in all of the networking events that they go to, the one rule is you can't pitch a project, which if you work in television, you understand that is a no-go, because when I worked on the Marilyn Dennis show, I would avoid going to PR events because I'm like, they're going to pitch themselves to be on the show. And then I've got to field all that all evening. So being forced to be in an environment where you're networking and not pitching, that was really fantastic because it reminded me that my excitement for storytelling and my insight into the changing landscape of media and this convergence that I'm seeing between television and social media, that is really interesting. So I just make a habit of saying interesting things when I'm in networking events. And that just naturally makes it easier for people to then maintain their interest and continue the conversation.
Yeah,
people aren't looking for products and services. They're looking for human connection, and they're looking for information. That's the advice I give my clients on social media. And it's the same in networking.
The other thing that I love is I always ask the other person to tell me what they do first.
Okay.
Because people love to talk about themselves. So it's a great icebreaker, right? It's a great way to warm up the conversation. And throughout that conversation, they're going to give me some clues as to how I may be able to help them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I can tailor my elevator story to providing them a solution for a problem that they've already identified. So it's a wonderful way to sort of, bring in what you do and provide the solution to the problem. And it gives them a wonderful icebreaker and a wonderful way to sort of open the door to a new type of conversation.
Yeah. And I think that's a great tactic for someone in your position, because you always say you change the pen for the paintbrush. So you're
Right.
also a multi hyphenate, right? You've
Right.
written books, you've been a coach, you have workshops, but you also do art, you have this. So you're a multi hyphenate. So
Right.
I think as well for you, an elevator pitch, an elevator story is like, well, which chapter of my full
That's so true.
encyclopedia is appropriate for this conversation?
That's
Yeah.
so true. And most people have multiple streams of income right now. I mean, I was
Yeah.
reading something recently that said, if you don't have at least 3 to 4 multiple streams of income, you're missing opportunities. So, we don't want to do the brain dump right in the first 30 seconds that you meet someone. So I always find that it's really wonderful if Tara tells me a little bit about her, and then I can say, wow, that's a really interesting story. Would you like to join our platform where we increase your visibility as a small business owner? And then that way it just creates some synergy throughout the conversation.
Yeah. As we're talking, I love your reframe of changing it from an elevator pitch to an elevator story, because the pitch, it has a certain energy, right? It has this
Right.
feeling of you've got this one shot, you have to convince them in a short period of time. But shifting into, no, this is the story. This is, to me, it's a more flexible way of communicating, right? This is
Right.
the first chapter. I also tell my clients, you're writing a never ending story. Your business
Yes.
story is never done.
Right.
And I think you and I have, in the years that we've known each other, explored what we're capable of. And I think updating your elevator pitch, because I think another huge problem that I see people make is they nail down a script that they then memorize and deliver, which from a performance standpoint it's terrible, because you're not a trained actor. So you don't know how to deliver memorized lines. And if you're not engaged in the words that you're saying, then the person listening to it, there's nothing for them to grab onto. So if you're not engaged, they're not going to be engaged. So all the work that you spent crafting this perfectly written 40-second pitch that you've memorized, it's a waste of time because no one's connected to it.
Well, the other thing too is that, we get nervous. I mean, one of the reasons why people practice when they're going to do any kind of public speaking is because it gives them confidence. Well, what a wonderful way to start a conversation with someone and just have an organic conversation talking about your story. And then it doesn't become so subscribed then, right? It's more from the heart. And you can tap into your own personal energy, which I think is really important. But to your point, changing the story is really important because no story has a beginning and an ending in business. I mean, it morphs and changes all the time. So based on the interest of the person that you're talking to, you can tailor or adapt your story so that it's interesting. And it also builds your confidence when you're doing that sharing.
Yeah, the flexibility in the conversation, because I think a lot of people think that, this person I'm talking to, I need to make them a qualified lead, but then they're forgetting the referral network. So it's like, just make a strong impression, and let the connection do what it's going to do. There's an element of trusting things to the universe. Just show up as your full authentic self, leave a lasting impression, and it will come back to you in some way,
For
shape, or
sure.
form.
I almost look at it like a job interview, like you're trying to make a connection and decide if you can help that individual. And if you can't personally help them, maybe someone in your network, you can say, wow, that's a really great idea. I'm going to introduce you to somebody that I know that's their jam. That's what they do. So it doesn't necessarily mean, to your point about qualifying, we don't necessarily need to qualify people for sales, but maybe qualify them for a referral.
Absolutely. A referral or a network. And that's what I love so much about being involved in your mentor, in your share your systems, or share your story. Sorry. That's what I love about being in Share Your Stories community, because it's a chance to practice your elevator story with other people. So you're getting real-time feedback from people.
Right.
And it's just, you make it so easy to just show up, share who you are, and then see where those connections go. And I think that is just such if you're nervous about, or if you're still figuring out what your story, whether it's you're figuring out your story for the first time or figuring out the transition, find a community like what Trish has created, and figure it out in that safe environment where you're getting real-time feedback. Otherwise, it's just your voice that is being repeated back to you again and again and again.
Well, and what I love is that we have a global platform. So, you know, we tend to think that it's a geographic issue. You know, any challenges we may be facing in business only happens to us because we live here. But when you join the network and you start to communicate with people globally, you find that we're so different and yet the same.
Yeah.
You know, because we experience all the same sorts of issues. It doesn't matter where we live. Business is business. Small business is small business.